So what if I told you there is a game that fuses Deus Ex's aesthetic and emergent gameplay with Thief's moody setting and stealth mechanics, and I Divine Cybermancy's gargantuan game spaces and whatever subgenre of surreal it's going for? Nobody would be crazy enough to do that, right? Right? Well, you'd be wrong, because today's game is precisely that. Peripeteia, coming out in early access on February 21st, is a third and first-person role-playing stealth and action game developed by Polish studio Ninth Exodus. The short version is that Peripeteia is inspired by immersive sims from Ironstorm and Looking Glass Studios. You know, the legendary studios that brought us classics like Deus Ex and Thief. No biggie. The long version is that Peripeteia is so much more than an homage to those decade-old games. I'm gonna be straight with you, this game will filter a lot of people. Hell, it almost filtered me. Actually, I'm not even sure if it did filter me and I'm just in denial. It's that kind of game. It's an incredibly ambitious game with lots of rough edges. Pure, lovable jank, the kind of jank that can only stem from passion and love for the craft. A few notes before we start. First of all, Peripeteia is an early access game, so please keep in mind that everything I say in this video is subject to change. Secondly, I want to thank Ninth Exodus for providing me with a review key more than a month ahead of its release. Third, due to the early access nature of Peripeteia, this video will be on the shorter side. Rather than covering as much of the game as possible like I do in a full review, I will just stick to the highlights and offer my general impressions on the game's state and mechanics. Also, I have a Blue Sky and a Patreon where you can support the channel with real life money. Let's go. Peripeteia takes place in an alternate history post-Soviet cyberpunk Poland. You play as Marie, or Polish Chelsea Wolf as I like to call her, a young cybernetically augmented mercenary who doubles as a concerned neighbor and millennial plant lady in between doing odd jobs for the city's myriad factions of various clashing ideologies. That's the basic premise, but there's obviously more to it than that. I'm not going to spoil too much of the story, but the gist is this. Marie used to be a super secret agent of sorts working as an assassin for the government. That government has since fallen and reformed under the Second Union. The game heavily implies that this event was part of a larger geopolitical catastrophe that resulted in the entire world going to shit. However, the reading material that I did manage to find helped me see the dots, but not connect them, so to speak. What we do know is this: without a steady source of income, Marie has taken to freelance work, accepting jobs from anyone willing to pay enough zloty to cover her rent. Later, she hears a rumor about an old bunker containing powerful technology, and that's all I'm willing to say about the story. It's got everything you would expect from a cyberpunk flick, but with a very distinct Eastern European flavor. Good shit. As far as the setting is concerned, this is an unapologetically dystopian cyberpunk city, where corruption and violence run rampant, everything looks as if it's covered in like 500 layers of grime, and housing quality standards are measured in rat colonies per square foot. Let me put it this way, imagine the most oppressive cyberpunk world possible, crank up the decay to 1000 and you get Peripeteia. Ancient AK-47s, rusty and possibly tetanus-infected cyberware, gas masks, NKVD-style trench coats, squalid moldy buildings, flashing busted neons. This game is a total vibe. All these elements, together with the unending rain, sprawling commie blocks, Ironstorm aesthetics, and the, if you'll allow me to use a fancy word, cyclopean scale of the city's buildings and infrastructure, makes for some pretty striking imagery. I often found myself stopping dead in my tracks and just staring in absolute awe at my surroundings. What kind of madman would design such a city? There are fucking pipes in this game that dwarf the most megalomaniacal Soviet buildings in size. Then there's the soundtrack. Oh my god, it goes so hard. If you like 90s drum and bass, you'll have a blast. Let's listen to a few snippets. Similar to Prey 2017 and the criminally underrated Control-Alt Ego, Peripeteia is an immersive sim. You can shoot and sneak in first and third person, stack crates, arrange items in the Tetris inventory, including this comically big Lenin head statue, complete objectives in multiple ways, there's a thief-style visibility gem that indicates your, well, visibility level, tons of lethal and non-lethal weapons, multiple paths to access certain areas, augments that allow you to do certain things like walk silently, jump higher, run faster, and pick up heavy objects, hacking minigames, it's all here. Like I said, Peripeteia is an immersive sim through and through, and it wears its influences on its sleeve. Like, the first numbered code is 0451 for crying out loud, you can't get more immersive simish than this. While Peripeteia's Deus Ex, Thief, and I Divine Cybermancy influences are pretty obvious from the get-go, I also noticed some Arx Fatalis influences. Not a whole lot, just some juicy little morsels, enough to make me go "Hua!" and point at the screen and piss and shit myself. An example of Peripeteia's Arx Fatalishness is how tactile the little moment-to-moment interactions feel. For example, to unload a weapon, you have to remove its magazine and physically drag it to your inventory. Vodka bottles break when thrown on the ground. The dialogue screen is this old-school PDA-like device. It even has an on and off button, which is a very cute detail. To play cassettes, you have to open the inventory and shove them in a cassette player. You can even close your inventory and leave them playing in the background. And let me tell you, running around endless commie block hallways with old patriotic Soviet music playing in the background is a vibe. Speaking of traversing oppressive Soviet architecture, let's talk a bit about how Peripeteia actually plays. So the main thing you'll be doing in this game is exploring Peripeteia's huge spaces, and when I say huge, I do really mean it. Not typical AAA open world with lots of signposting and activities to funnel you huge, but like massive, gigantic, I Divine Cybermancy huge. Both the game's indoor and outdoor spaces are immense. If you see a landmark or even a silhouette of a building in the distance, chances are you can go there and explore it. If you find a way to reach it, of course, because boy oh boy does this game love to blue ball you with sprawling networks of pipes and catwalks and balconies that lead absolutely nowhere. Or maybe they do lead somewhere and I backtracked just short of discovering a stash of valuable items. You know that old saying, 90% of Peripeteia addicts quit right before they're about to hit it big. Now, Peripeteia's parkour mechanics are quite fun. The spaces are huge, but Marie can sprint indefinitely. Once you understand the game's, I guess you can call it design logic, the level scale becomes progressively less intimidating. Still, I found myself lost quite often. But here's the thing, I honestly don't know if it's a design issue solvable by including subtle signposts and environmental hints to help players find their bearings, or a me issue. I'm not saying they should add objective markers, but I think there's a reasonable compromise that could be reached here between, you know, giving hints and outright spoon-feeding players. Like, for example, in Gothic, I know. NPCs will give you some rough directions or tell you to look for a landmark. Granted, if you're truly lost, you can switch to third-person mode and zoom out to get a more global view of your surroundings. When in doubt, just look for the closest ledge because almost all of them can be grabbed. Peripeteia has a lot going for it in terms of player choice and ways to play the game. From what I've played, around 10 hours at the time of writing, there seems to be a decent variety of options to accomplish your goals. You can sneak, go guns blazing, and if neither of these options are viable, you can make use of the game's janky but functional parkour system to get a drop on large groups of enemies. In terms of sneaky tools, you get an electrified stun baton, very similar to the electric pod from Deus Ex, and a sword whose charged sneak attack makes the game's physics shit themselves to a degree unseen since Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. Huh. Was this intentional? Now, if you're not one for sneaking, there's a huge arsenal of weapons to choose from, ranging from the usual suspects, shotguns, pistols, assault rifles, and a hilarious harpoon gun. The gunplay is surprisingly meaty and visceral. Firefights are usually short and intense, with most shotgun-wielding enemies being able to one-shot you if they get the drop on you. So basically, you have to be very careful how you approach encounters. But here's the thing, in true immersive sim fashion, you might not need to kill enemies at all. In one mission, I was fully prepared to assault a communist hideout only to be allowed to wander around freely because I had accidentally and retroactively completed a quest for them by doing some dirty work for the opposing faction. On the other side of the spectrum, I accidentally fucked up an entire questline by exploring ahead and killing a mob boss that the communists wanted alive. When I announced to the leader that I popped their buddy, he straight up shot me on the spot. And this is just a small sample. I'm sure I would have discovered more branching paths had I been more patient and inquisitive. And that's pretty much all I can talk about without spoiling too much of the game's current content. Peripeteia shows a lot of potential. I'm 100% confident that with more polish and content, Peripeteia can ascend to the rank of indie immersive sim modern classic, up there with the likes of Control-Alt-Ego. Until then, we have a set of 5 incredibly ambitious levels, an intriguing cyberpunk setting with Eastern European sensibilities, and a story that goes places, let's put it that way. So if you're like fiending for an experience that scratches that Deus Ex / Thief / I Divine Cybermancy / Arx Fatalis / literally any immersive sim you can think of itch, you should definitely give Peripeteia a shot. Thanks for watching. As always, a huge thank you to my wonderful patrons whose generosity makes these videos possible. I'll see you next time.